And just before I start, I also want to wish all the best to our previous clerk. I really appreciate his service to our committee, and I'm sad to see him go. I want to thank everybody from the Auditor General's office for your incredible work. I found this report very enlightening, and I really appreciate it. My office was just recently contacted by one of the veterans that's a regular with us, and he told us that he sent an application in March for a mouth guard because he's grinding his teeth when he sleeps. He got a request for additional paperwork in June. He uploaded all of that to his VAC account in July, and then was told that he had to wait 33 weeks to get a response to that. So I think that's a pretty clear example of what's still continuing to happen. So I guess my question to you is, one of the recommendations that you brought forward was providing useful waiting time information for veterans to provide that. And I'm just wondering, what does that mean? And because I don't know all of their systems, what things do they need to do to improve that so that veterans get the information and that we can see those wait times go shorter? It seems crazy that for something that simple, they're waiting that long.
So I hear you about, the wait times. The useful information, I guess, is about making it clear to veterans that, the website might say the service standard is 16 weeks, but you have to read into what that means. 16 weeks from a completed application in 18% of the cases. There's a lot of caveats to that. That starts, so a completed application is only once all that back and forth has happened with the veteran. So I can appreciate that a veteran thinks I sent in my application in March, but it's not complete if they're still going back and forth with you looking for additional information. But the clock starts ticking once it's a completed application. So I think part of that is making it clearer to veterans, when that sort of starts and when the expectation starts. Then it's about ending it at the same time, right? You might land on a decision about this is an eligible injury, but then the whole assessment of the severity needs to happen, which establishes the amount of that will happen. But they stop counting when they've made a decision, but there's still a wait time to establish the severity, then to process the payment to a veteran. I think some transparency about that helps level set expectations for veterans. Then it's about finding out where all of those bottlenecks are and actually tackling them in a concrete way. And that's what we saw, is that they don't have that information. They can't tell you why, where something sits in the process longer and why. And so they're unable to really target measures to improve the processing time.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, that idea of data and how important it is, and I found that really interesting. And I've heard this in other ways, that we've tried to figure out issues, and it often comes back to the fact that the data and the way that it's collected does not provide for an opportunity for us as MPs to understand or our constituents to understand, and I think that's incredibly frustrating. So, you have recommendations on the data. I'm just trying to understand what the process. I understand you said earlier, we got to let them have a little bit of time to try to figure that out and implement it. But what is the process, and is there any sort of accountability that we can call on the government to address these issues in a more timed fashion, as opposed to waiting perhaps another 7 years?
Well, we did a report back in 2014 that just looked at mental health applications for veterans, and in that report we actually recommended that the department should look at what is causing the delays and then implement measures to address them. I'm not sure they've at least tackled that first part, which is identifying what's causing the delays. Mm-hmm. So some of it is having a better case management system. I mean, there's so many out there. There's so many ways of managing this data to be able to track and know how long a file sits in a certain area. We have one exhibit where we talk about how they started to track now, which is new. They didn't track in the past. They can now track how long a file sits once it's decided that it's complete before it gets assigned to an adjudicator. So that's important to know. If that's a bottleneck or if there's a delay there, then you can implement measures to fix that. But it's about tracking a file in a consistent way, but also about tracking it in a quality way. Some of the data quality issues we saw was that a file was put in there and the date of entry looked like it had been 10 years ago. And when we challenged, they said, oh no, that was a typo. And it had to be fixed. So some of it's human quality, but some of it's about having the right system to track an application through the steps.
This is so interesting. So one of the things that I'm hearing really clearly is that they may not have that double oversight too, where somebody goes through and just does quality control and looks at making sure that the date wasn't entered in, so it looks like 10 years. Yeah, okay.
Well, and I think that's why we ended up with medians instead of averages, right? There were some outliers that if we used an average would have really skewed the results, and we had to really do a median calculation, even though it's a harder concept to get across, but there was some of those data quality issues that really caused us to have to go that route.
Thank you.